There is no such thing as a risk-free strategy. No matter what option you choose or how you decide to implement it, there will be risk. Whether the risk concerns intellectual property, economic conditions, or employee morale, you must attempt to identify and assess your risks and determine what actions you can take to manage them. It's important to remember that every person has their own risk appetite, the risk they are comfortable with. A company board or senior management is no different. Your job is to ensure that they have a good picture of the strategy's risk so they can determine if it is below their threshold. The process is actually quite straightforward, but does require a framework for analysis and consistent application. Don't slip up at step 1 like Borders did. The bookstore chain filed for bankruptcy in 2011 after years of declining sales. In their 2003 annual report, Borders' 2 strategic themes were to grow domestically by expanding the core superstore business, and secondly, expand into international markets with 1,200 bookstores in 6 countries. Somehow, Borders failed to identify or mitigate a key risk to their business model: digital sales. And in hindsight, it was extremely obvious. Jeff Bezos started Amazon in 1995 in Seattle. By 1999, Amazon had generated $610 million in online sales of books and CDs. Things got worse for Borders in 2007 when the Kindle was launched and e-books were born. The lesson is, you can't mitigate a risk you never identified in the first place. The next step in the risk management framework is to understand the causes of a risk. Companies sometimes get this wrong. I worked for a large food manufacturer in Australia that identified the most important input into the manufacturing process was steam. The risk management strategies in place included installing a secondary boiler in case the main one failed, having the necessary spare parts in store all the time, and training of maintenance staff in every aspect of the steam boiler so that issues could be quickly fixed. Then one day there was a catastrophic accident at the terminal of the biggest gas supplier to Southern Australia. No one at work had ever asked what would happen if the gas stopped. I can still remember a lot of sleepless nights working out how to get a gas boiler to run on diesel fuel. So make sure you try to identify all the possible causes for the identified risk. Step 3 is to assess consequences. What is important here is to get a second and third opinion on them. A doctor will tell you that the consequence of blocked arteries is a stroke. A lawyer will tell you the consequence of not having a will is expensive legal bills. Work through all the consequences in a team and consider both direct and indirect consequences. A direct consequence might be a loss of sales. An indirect one could be damage to an organisation's brand. The best way to map them out is to use a table to assess consequence in key categories like financial, personnel, resourcing, stakeholder value, and so on. In order to prioritise risks, you need to rate them. This is done by combining the consequence of a risk with the likelihood of its occurrence. With some risks, the likelihood or probability can be determined through statistical analysis, and with other risks, the assessment will be subjective. As with consequences, it is best to get a range of opinions where your assessment of consequences is subjective. So to recap, all strategies have risks, so you must identify and assess them and form a plan to manage them. Start with identifying your risks and then determining their causes. Next, assess the likely consequence if the risk was to occur, and finally, the likelihood of it occurring. Once you have drawn your risk rating table, rate the risks so that you can prioritise them in terms of which require the most resource and time to determine the course of action to minimise those risks.